welcome to Crime and Court. My name is Heather, and this is another update in the Delphi case, Indiana versus Richard Allen, and we are seeking justice for Abby and Libby. And as you can see in the thumbnail, today's episode is titled Judge Gull to Allow Confessions Made in State of Psychosis. So I thought for today we would read through Judge Gull's orders. So she sorry, my dog keeps barking for some reason. So Judge Gull came out with some orders regarding the some motions from the defense. So we'll read through that, and then we're going to read through someone's notes who attended the 3-day hearing for Delphi, and their the notes the portion of the testimony where Dr. Walla was on the stand, because her testimony is in question. So let's dive in. Please hit that like button and let's get started. All right, so what am I trying to do? Shrink myself. All right, so like I said, this is the order. This is an amended order or judgment of the court. The court, having this matter under advisement following a hearing conducted on January 31st, 2024, and the hearing actually lasted from July 30th through August 1st of this year, on the defendant's motion to suppress statements, the state's objection to defendant's motion to suppress, the state's motion to dismiss the motion to suppress, and the state's motion for admissibility, and having considered the witness's testimony, the exhibits admitted into evidence, the arguments of counsel, and the applicable statutes and case law, now grants the state's request for pretrial ruling on admissibility pursuant to 1C 2531 117, whatever that is. The statements given by defendant to Monica so of course, like right off the top, she's already granting the state for something. These uh yeah, right off the bat, she's granting the state's request for pretrial ruling on admissibility. So state's motion for admissibility. Um I can't remember what that one was off the top of my head because there have been so many. And then there's been like time in between where you don't hear anything. All right, so the statements given by defendant to Dr. Monica H. Walla, s- doctor of psychiatry, don't know, probably psychology, are not privileged based upon the exception noted in the statute. One, trials for homicide when the disclosure relates directly to the fact or immediate circumstances of said homicide. All statements given by defendant to Dr. Walla are admissible in the trial. Defendant's arguments to the contrary go to the weight the jury would give such statements, not their admissibility. So she's saying it's up to the jury, not me, to decide whether it should be considered or not. Okay, but it's up to the judge to decide what's too prejudicial and what shouldn't come in at trial. But she's gonna say, nope, I'm gonna let it all come in. And all these confessions that were given under duress, given under psychological medications, and we're gonna read about that. So, anyways, continuing on, Judge Gull says, having taken the state's motion to dismiss the motion to suppress filed April 11th, under advisement at the hearing, the court agrees with the state. Oh, well, surprise, surprise. That the defendant has failed to comply with the criminal rules of procedure by neglecting to clearly state which specific statements he is seeking to suppress nor the legal basis for the suppression. Despite these deficiencies, the court has been able to determine that the statements given to the defendant's family members were voluntary, not coerced by any state action, and were not made under threats of violence or improper influence. Well, there you have it, because Judge Gull says so. I believe it, obviously, because she's so pure and honest and good and sticking up for justice. Not. All right, so although the defendant is clearly in custody, he initiated the communication with his family and was not subjected to custodial interrogation when he spoke to his family. Remember, in Frank's memos, we were told that he had been pressured to, was it in the Frank's memos? I can't remember now, but we know that he was pressured by the guards. He felt pressured. He was under a state of psychosis now, we know, and he was being pressured by particular guards that had odinous patches on their shoulders, on their CO uniforms. All right, so he initiated the contact, is what Judge Gull says, and so it's all voluntary. Further, the statements given by defendant to the correctional officers, inmate companions, the warden, mental health personnel, medical personnel, and the Indiana State Police were unsolicited by any of those individuals and were voluntary, given without coercion or interrogation. Did she ask all these people? Were they all asked at the trial or at the hearing? Because if not, then how can she determine that? The defendant has not shown that he suffered from psychological coercion by the state, which caused him to make these statements. To the contrary, the evidence shows he specifically sought out the warden by written communication he initiated and verbal statements he offered to guards, inmate companions, mental health professionals, and medical personnel. The defendant has failed to show any of these statements were the result of coercive interrogation by the state. This is horrific. We all know what's been going on in Delphi and how secretive they've been and hush hush, and they have to whisk Alan away to another prison so that they can coerce confessions out of him. And if they can do this to him, they could do it to anyone. And Dr. Walla is going to say in her testimony, she's going to say that she didn't think that he was suffering from any kind of psychotic break, but she gave him psychotic medication anyways. So why would you do that? Don't know. It just, nothing in this case makes sense. The defendant has failed to show any of the statements were the result of coercive interrogation by the state or that they were the result of his pretrial detention. The totality of the circumstances of defendant's pretrial detention were not intended to force confessions from the defendant. The defendant's, so says you, the defendant's pretrial detention is to protect him from harm. BS. We all know, Judge Gull, that that's not the case. He could have been safe nearby. The court is not persuaded that the detention caused the defendant to make incriminating statements. He has been in solitary for way too long. I think it's been like over 100 days, and you're not supposed to go over 30 if you don't want to inflict permanent psychological damage to someone. The court is now persuaded that the detention caused the defendant to make incriminating statements. Again, 30 days is the max for solitary. He's been in solitary forever. All right. So while the defendant does suffer from major depressive disorder and anxiety, those are not serious mental illnesses that prevent the defendant from making voluntary statements. I think it also might even make it to the point, like she says it doesn't, but I disagree with her ruling anyways. But I would think that if he is in that bad of a mental state, wouldn't he not be um, mental? What's the term? The legal term, like not mentally. Um, I can't think of the word. Like not able to stand trial because you are psychologically. What is the word? You guys know what I'm saying, and you're screaming it through the screen, but I can't hear you, so I apologize. Got to turn you up. The court finds the statements given by the defendant to Dr. Walla, the warden, inmates, guards, medical personnel, medical or mental health professionals, and law enforcement personnel were not coerced, were voluntary, were not the result of interrogation by the state or its actors, nor the product of his confinement, and therefore denies the defendant's motion to suppress statements. Therefore, all his confessions are coming in because Gull. We knew that that's how she was going to rule anyways. All right, so this is where sometime in the timeline, Razi, attorney Razi calls Walla, Dr. Walla. So, uh, as you can see, these are just bullet points. So I'm just going to read through them as if I'm just reading the bullet point notes, and I'm going to try to put them all into complete sentences. But if I don't, apologies. I'm going to try. All right, so just because of the way that it's typed out here. So, attorney Brad Rosie calls Walla to the stand. According to Walla's background, she is a lead psychologist since 2011. She has no prior work with the DOC, Department of Corrections, assigned by administration to treat Rick, always within the DOC custody. So he's always been in the DOC custody as she's treating him. Walla and Rick's communication. Contacted regarding personal/private matters. Varied communication frequency. So this is the communication between Rick and Dr. Walla. She used to talk to him daily for 4 months upon arrival and during his self-ideation watch. And then she would talk to him weekly for a month until April 2023, and then it went back to daily after with her or her staff for the next 4 months. So that's been their communication. It's kind of been off and on, but she's never lost touch with him. She's always been kind of keeping an eye on him. And there are other involved therapists that she thinks it might be at the master's level, but she's not sure. She has a doctorate. Um, Contact circumstances. The contact would usually occur while Rick was in his cell during the rounds. So, is that her rounds? Just going around and see, seeing all of her patients within the prison. So she just went and sought him out if she was just circling around the prison. Is that her rounds? I'm assuming. She offered once a week out of cell therapy at cell door. Hmm. All right, so the rounds description. Rounds involved saying how you doing through the door slit. Okay. So he's in one of those kinds of doors where it's just a slit where he gets his meals, and if he's getting his cuffs on or something, when the guards come and put the cuffs on him, he puts his hands through the slit. So the rounds, good. I wanted a description, or I wanted some clarification on this. The rounds include how you doing through the door slit. She did not even open the port door, so the door always remained closed. It was just through the slit that they communicated. This was the standard for mental health rounds. 15 people were in solitary confinement. So it's not like she's having a private conversation with a patient. She's in the middle of solitary confinement talking through the slit of the door. That's not a private, that's not a good environment to get honest, quality answers from your patients. All right, so cell location and rounds frequency. Sometimes Rick was in a cell, but not his assigned cell. Rounds occurred dozens of times a day. Not much time was spent with each inmate during rounds, so she would just come say hi, how you doing, check on them, and then kind of leave. So it doesn't seem like it was a whole lot of value. It was just her checking on the patients to make sure they're still alive. Visit location and the self-ideation watch. So Rick was placed in a holding area for Wallace visits. Rick was on the S word watch when he arrived at the Reception Diagnostic Center, the RDC. He didn't sign anything because he wasn't allowed a pen. So, not voluntary. He went involuntarily into this whatever watch. Confidentiality and waivers. Walla is unsure if she addressed confidentiality right away. Waivers were eventually signed, unsure when. So, does he even know? Like, did he even have any awareness of what he was signing at the time? 8 items don't qualify as confidential, content unknown. Okay, whatever that is. Cell conditions. Maybe they'll circle back. Cell conditions. Some circumstances of Rick's cell. He had an 8 by 12-foot cell. He was allowed out one time a day / per week. She thinks she's not sure if it was one time a day or one time a week. Probably once a day because I think it's like 23 hours they're in that, and then they get about an hour out, about an hour's rec time. Rec is one time per week. She thinks should be 1.5 hours 3 times a week. She's not sure. All right, so companion watch and clothing. So he's not even getting not normal. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Prisoners who are not treated this horribly by the system, by if they're treated by the book, they should have recreation every day, once an hour, or once one time for at least an hour every day. And he's not getting that. He's not getting what everybody else is. He's only going maybe 3 times a week or so. He's not sure. She's not sure. All right, so the companion watch and clothing. No companion watch during this period. So a companion watch is like another prisoner or somebody who would be taking notes on other prisoners, which I don't know how that's not like an incentivized something or other to get in good graces and to take down other people in the prison. I don't understand. But they have companions, whatever that is, for the S word watch. All right, so they wore smocks, supposed to be caveman garb, acted as a deterrent for recreation because reason unclear. Wieners mentioned. I don't know what that is. Something about their clothing. Not sure. Maybe the clothing was uncomfortable and he didn't like it. Maybe it was too cold or airy or who knows. All right, so Diener's objection. This is confusing because there used to be a judge named Diener in the very beginning before Judge Gull, and he recused himself. But now there is an attorney, Diener, who is on the prosecution's team. So we'll see her name pop up. So just, yeah, being sure, or just know that that's her when talking about her here. All right, so Diener's objection. Diener objects to relevance of recreation time in relation to psychology. Rosie counters by stating Wallace should know about such matters. They move on. This is a big deal too, because, well, maybe not a big deal, but I think it should have more weight because your psyche does some strange things to you in solitary confinement, and it really that was bothering me that it wasn't centered. It really messes people up mentally sometimes. So not having that recreation time to get out of your cell, looking forward to that time every day, it's like the only thing you care about, that and meals, because you're bored out of your friggin' mind. So I don't know. I would think that recreation time is important, but Diener, of course, moves on because it is important and she knows that, but whatever. All right, so cell videos and observations. Walla probably viewed cell video, so video while Rick was in his cell, but she doesn't know, I guess. She noted, okay, so now Walla is the one that was in like the social media groups for Justice for Abby and Libby and for Richard Allen. So just know that, taking this into account with her evaluation, because I think it counts to have all the info. So she says she probably viewed a cell video. She noted that Rick paced a lot, 5 steps each way. She thinks that he had a light on all the time, which could be considered a form of recreation. What? How is having a light on all the time considered a form of recreation? It's actually considered a form of torture. If you don't know, people do this to like prisoners of war, and mobsters do this to like torture people and keep them up all day and all night with like lights on and loud noises and things so you can't sleep. Having the light on all day that's not a benefit. That's bad. You're not supposed to sleep with light. The darker it is, the better for you. The more light you have, it like kills the neurons and things. And yeah, you need darkness. I sleep in the dark. I pitch black in here. It's great. It's amazing. Such good sleep too. Anyways, but yeah, having a light on, not a good thing. Walla doesn't know the specifics about the S word watch. She believes that it's probably a good idea for him to have the light on. Again, that's a form of torture. Just saying. All right, so cell observations. Walla noticed Rick's scarred windows. Did she mean to say scared of, or he scarred? Scarred what? Scarred windows. I don't know if there's a typo by the author or what. I noticed that before and I was like, what is that? So Walla noticed Rick's scarred windows. She acknowledged he slept and ate on the floor. Rick told her that there was a problem with rats. Walla finds this distressing. Rick was in one of the 4 isolated cells, and that is confirmed to be true. So he was in isolation. Verbal harassment and noise. Other inmates would yell things at Rick, like KILL yourself, or that you were a baby KILLer. I wonder if that really happened, or if that was something that needed to be in here to say, like, oh yeah, he's in danger if he goes out in general population. I don't know. Anyways, that bothered Rick and Walla, as did the general noise level. So it was a loud noise. Rick and Walla apparently heard other inmates saying these things to Rick. Rick's medical history and evaluation. Walla was familiar with Rick's cardiac history and a history of depression. I'm not sure what the cardiac thing is, but maybe he has some heart issues. Right, so no formal psychological evaluation was ever conducted. No formal structured interview had ever taken place between the two of them. Only about 15 to 20 minutes spent in the initial assessment. Walla knew Rick had major depressive disorder, so she's only spent 15 to 20 minutes with him originally in her original assessment, and then just stayed in contact with him and watched him. That's why she was there every day, because she was doing her rounds. That's why she talked to him every day. Walla knew, oh, I said that already. Okay. No, I didn't. Walla knew Rick had major depressive disorder, and by his standards, it was not a serious condition. Walla disagrees with this assessment, so she thinks his major depressive disorder is a big deal. That's probably the one thing I agree with her on there. Medical history highlights 2019 hospitalized for depression. Rick was. He was in psychotropic medication since he was 25. The file indicated that Rick was at risk of self ideation, taking yourself out. So going in to this situation, going into being accused of a crime, he's already been hospitalized for depression, like psychotropic medications that he's been on since 25, and he's had issues with ideation of taking himself out. All right, so medical history continued. History of generalized anxiety disorder. Yes. History of personality disorder. She says more severe anxiety when separated from his family, but yes. So he does have a history of personality disorder a bit, I guess. That doesn't really, but she didn't really answer it. She says more severe anxiety when separated from family. So that's not even answering this question. So, but that was her answer. So whatever. All right, so code D was assigned to Rick at some point. A through E scale represents a stage of symptom acuteness. E equals a psychiatric ward. Newcastle, usually the top choice for E level patients. Not sure if Newcastle is a hospital that they would send him to. Fragility and solitary confinement. Rick was fragile upon admission. So even before going into admission or being admitted into prison, he was already in a delicate state of mind. Being thrown in solitary confinement led to a defensive reaction. He became verbally taunting, and he was described as having an eggshell personality, whatever that means. His ideations on intake and administrative decision. No records indicate that Rick was wanting to take his own life at when intake occurred. So no indications of that. He was placed on that S word watch due to high risk no matter what. That's a weird way to put it. Admin was maybe that's just the way that Dr. Walla put it, but because the person quoted it, due to high risk no matter what. So admin was going to keep him there no matter what she said, referring to AO administrative observation status. So they were going to watch him regardless of whether he had ideations or not. Is that what I'm taking from that? Restrictions and the S word blanket. He was on restrictions till he left Westville. Remember, he left Westville, went to Wabash, sorry, and then now he's back. He's in county now. So restrictions and the S word blanket. He was on restrictions till he left Westville. So probably in solitary the whole time. Offered 1 to 3 hours of recreation per week, and he was provided a hard blanket, meaning he can't hang himself with it. Great. That would be not very warm, I don't think. All right, so memo. There was a memo, something, date missing. Companions. Companions and case discussion. Did Walla order companions for Rick? No, not at all. It wasn't her place to suggest it. So she didn't order these S Watch companions for Rick. There were problems with Rick's companions from the start. They talked to him about his case and other inmates. At least one companion told their family about Rick. Okay. Rick's frustration and distrust. Rick told Walla that he was frustrated with his companions. He believed that they were untrustworthy. So the people that were watching him, he believed were untrustworthy. Go figure. When Rick told Walla about the companions asking about his case, she didn't do anything about it. Walla acknowledges this is not ideal, but it is the system. So she didn't do anything about the fact that this person was not trustworthy and watching him 24/7. Companions are paid for their work. It's considered a job. So these other inmates are getting paid to sit there and watch Richard Allen and take notes and things like that and keep tabs on him for the higher ups. Psychology program expansion and consent. March 2023, psych program expanded to 40 Indiana State Prison inmates. Walla thinks that the program was shut down possibly by a Dr. Goldberg, but she's not sure. Walla sought Rick's consent for the extended program. Both Walla and Rick agreed that the program wasn't a good fit per doctor's orders. Walla let Rick make the final decision and he said no to participating. Therapeutic services and settings, counseling sessions. Rick was one of Walla's first pretrial unmedicated patients. Sessions locations varied. Sometimes it would be down the hall for more involved sessions, sometimes in a 2 by 3 triangular cage made of concrete walls with a gate in the front and a see-through gate at that. A grate at that, sorry. So Wabash facility comparison, similar area at Wabash with vertical bars described as a shank cage style. Walla had been to Wabash before. Traditional versus actual therapy. Rosie describes a traditional therapy session which doesn't align with Rick's experience at all. No formal therapeutic evaluation was conducted. Handouts and limited resources. Walla provided handouts on depression and anxiety. Also, she gave Rick a mandala, a memory book, crossword puzzles, and crayons. That's nice. She gave Rick a gift. Okay, but I still think she kind of sucks in some ways. All right, so administrative limitation. She's been watching him, evaluating him, and she's been in these like social media groups posting and stuff about this case. Administrative limitations. Walla's abilities were limited to the administration DOC. Focus was on basic conversation, medication management, and general talk about Rick's condition. The S word safety check. We all talk about the S word to make sure they're safe, says Walla. Doctor patient privilege and expectations. Question: did Walla ever talk to Rick about expectations to doctor patient privilege? The response is unclear. Notes say, think, oh my God, she so. I don't know what that means. Follow up question: does Walla even know what the expectations are? Response: Walla lists everything except confessions related to homicide charges. Yeah. So it's not her job to get confessions. Additional question about waivers. Walla doesn't know. So anything about these waivers or him waiving his right to whatever, waiving his privilege, waiving the doctor-client privilege, she's unclear with her answers and doesn't give uh, accurate or clear response. All right, so Walla's employment and notes. Walla technically works for Centurion and as a DOC contract. Paid by Centurion with a few employment contract switches over time, contract renewed every 3 years, Walla made daily rounds reports. Her original notes were shredded. Convenient. But she would go and she made reports on her rounds that she did every day. So that'd be great to see, but she shred them. So never mind. Importance of notes and Rick's claims of innocence. Agreement with Walla's original notes would be the best record. Walla says Rick proclaimed innocence at the beginning. So if that had been in her notes, that got destroyed. That might have helped. He was fixated on his wife and believed she was misrepresented. By December 2022, Rick emphasized that he was being treated badly. I feel so bad. Like, I feel like this guy was reaching out for help and he didn't get it from the appropriate people. And this Walla person, I think, is more out for fame than anything. Walla, I mean, maybe she's great, but that's my take. Maybe she's great, but until I see otherwise, I don't think so. Wallace notes, March 2023, Rick stated, "I don't feel right." Walla acknowledged his baseline is depression and categorized his condition as poor, critical, and deteriorating. Walla's notes, April 1st, 2023, documented uh, ideation to take yourself out and delusions. Walla's notes continued, Rick's statement, losing his life would bring relief. No longer being alive would be a relief. She observed him having insomnia, poor appetite, hopelessness, low self esteem, and more, which was unspecified. Wallace notes, April 2nd, 2023, noted Rick was more critical, but the specifics of that are unclear. So he was more critical of what? More critical of therapy? More critical of Dr. Walla? More critical of the conditions he was being held in? What? What was he critical of? He had many things to be critical of. The investigation into this case? At some point, emergency involuntary medication administered once only. So there was an emergency involuntary medication that was administered once only, just once only. All right, so reason, head injury, and self harm. This might have been when he was running into the walls. So somebody might have induced some kind of sedation so that he was not running and slamming his head on the wall, which is what was reported. So Wallace notes, April 13th, 2023, grave disability noted, observed consuming feces, and considering involuntary medication via injection. So this is about the time. So he was running into the wall, slamming his head. He was eating his own feces. He was smearing it all over his cell. And this is about the time when Wallace states that she might think of giving him some some kind of psychotropic medication. Involuntary medication hearing. Location room 208. A hearing was held and involuntary medication was scheduled. So it must have been approved because they scheduled when it would happen. Conversation about competency. On April 21st, Walla had a conversation with Rick regarding his competency to stand trial. Was that the word I was looking for? Yeah. Saying, like, is he even competent to stand trial? Is what I would like to know. She believed he called her and expressed concerns about his deterior. She believed he called her and expressed concern about his deteriorating mental state. She doesn't know if he called her. So this was over the phone where he said this. That's not clear. That's on the attorney to clear that up. All right, so disjointed thoughts and confession. Walla observed disjointed thoughts in Rick, so his thoughts weren't making sense or going, like, they weren't linear and they didn't, lead to the next, and he was all over the place. On May 3rd, Rick confessed. He said, "I want to confess." Walla questioned if he was being truthful as he made similar statements multiple times. Worsening condition. By May 12th, Rick's disorganized thinking had accelerated. On May 18th, he had a man down incident due to his next scheduled injection. What does that mean? He had a man down incident? What is a man down incident? Okay. I don't know. Janice and vegetative state. Janice was present. Janice is his mother. Kathy is his wife. So Janice was present, possibly crying, and was shown documentation of Rick's vegetative state of depression. And there was the reference material for this is the psych reactions to stress. Whoops. Depression peak and signs of improvement. So May 22nd, depression at peak. Noted physiological symptoms included trembling, stuttering, buckling knees, and bulging eyes. You guys, this is not, you can't fake this. Nobody's gonna eat their own feces just to fake being crazy. There's something scary going on in Rick, and he's not getting the proper treatment. And because of that, it's just worsening, in my opinion. All right, so by July 11th, some signs of improvement were noted. Ongoing sessions and injections. In October, Walla and Rick were still having sessions despite Rick already being sentenced. He continued to proclaim his innocence. It's mentioned that maybe 12,000 out of 3,000 inmates. 12,000 out of 3? How does that make sense? I mean, 1,200 out of 3,000 receive regular injections. Unclear what that means. Continued harassment and psychotic symptoms. In November, Rick reported still being haunted and harassed. This harassment occurred over the phone and spanned a significant time period. It's noted that a psychotic process was occurring between March and June. Diagnosis of psychosis noted in Walla's notes, including catatonic state and disorganized speech. So she marked it down. She put it in her notes. So that's good that it is on record that that's what he was experiencing. Also considered a mental illness, a serious mental illness by Wallace standards. Contradiction in court statement. Ronnie states, I'm not sure who Ronnie is. Ronnie states he, Rick, was sent here for safety, highlighting a contradiction. Question. As a doctor, do you agree that he met criteria for severe mental illness? Answer. No doubt, meaning yes. Rick met that criteria. Yet, the court declared the DOC to be a safe environment for Rick despite his SMI. As we're reading this, keep in mind that Judge Gull denied the uh, motion and said straight up that there's no first of all, major depressive anxiety order are not serious mental illnesses. This report says that they are, that Dr. Walla would consider them serious. And what else? The defendant has failed to show any of these statements were the result of coercive interrogation by the state. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but I suspect we will. Garbage day, guys. I don't know if you can hear that, but man, it's loud. The defendant has not shown that he suffered from psychological coercion by the state. Well, psychological coercion, just he's he's just psychologically, mentally unwell, mentally unfit to sit for a trial, in my opinion. And yet here you are holding him in solitary, like indefinitely. Uh, where was I? Okay, so no doubt. Yet the court declared the DOC to be a safe environment for Rick. That doesn't change his brain. Connect, possibly indicating that the need to connect his condition to his treatment. Connect his condition to his treatment. That doesn't change his brain. Connect. Okay. All right, so SMI is funny, like when people don't say their complete sentences and it gets put in a transcript and you're like, what the heck were they trying to say? Or a typo and you're like, what the heck? I spent probably way too much time trying to figure it out. SMI and solitary confinement policy. SMI patients, so serious, what's the SMI? Serious mental illness, which she considers him to be, although Judge Gull denies it. SMI and solitary confinement policy. SMI patients are typically placed in solitary confinement for 30 days per Indiana Department of Corrections codes. Why would you put a seriously mentally ill patient in solitary? Unless they were to harm others and that was part of their condition. I don't know. But I don't know. I would think that would just exacerbate their condition. She notes that the policy exists due to potential efforts on the brain and because it's documented protocol. So, exceptions and Rick's case. Exceptions to this 30-day policy are made for individuals deemed an extreme danger to others. Walla asserts that Rick did not fall under this extreme danger exception. Question: approximately how long was Rick in solitary? Answer: 12 months. Confirmed as yes. A year. Holy crap, it's been longer than I thought. He's been in solitary for a full year. Holy crap. All right, so Osbrooks and IPAC versus IDOC lawsuit. Questions about Indiana Protection and Advocacy Services Commission versus the IDOC lawsuit in the Southern District Court are raised. Diener objects, claiming it's not relevant. Ronnie argues that this. Who is Ronnie? Ronnie argues that this case established policies relevant to the current proceedings. Ronnie highlights rules of proof and their importance. Gull, the judge, allows the line of questioning. So, is it he a prosecutor, maybe? Ronnie? Or she? Exhibits and DSM 4? DSM 4 reference. Exhibit from the case is presented to Gull. Sections 21 and 28A of the DSM 4 are referenced. Aren't we on 5? I don't know why we're using the old version of DSM, uh, which is like the standard that they use for mental health conditions. So the mention of SMI adopted, potentially appointed, apted, sorry, how did I get adopted? Mention of SMI apted, potentially meaning appointment, and a statement suggesting that the DOC violated someone's rights. Shame on you, DOC, you violated rights. Okay. Diener is visibly upset, pissed, shaking her head. The APA Code of Conduct. So Ronnie provides Walla. So Walla's still on the stand here. Ronnie provides Walla with documents regarding exceptions to privilege. She reminds Walla about statements related to homicides not being privileged, which Rick was allegedly not informed about. So Ronnie is a female, because referring to her as she. She reminds Walla about statements related to homicides not being privileged. So it's not protected and she has to disclose it. Discussion about APA's code of conduct. But so Rick wasn't informed about the fact that his statements to Walla weren't privileged. So I don't think that's fair. Judge Gull doesn't care. All right, break and coercion discussion. There was a 10-minute break that occurred. Both Janice and Kathy are seen crying. Janice, the mother of Alan, and Kathy, Richard Allen's wife. So there's discussion then about whether Rick was coerced and influenced by his environment. Diener states, this is what we're trying to determine, whether he was coerced or not. Continuation with Walla in the afternoon. The deposition resumes with Walla. Mr. Allen Rick contends that he was treated poorly due to his mental state or disability, which is not consistent with established guidelines. Diener objects, arguing that Walla lacks authority to declare whether DOC violated policies regarding his SMI status. Ronnie counters by stating, we still have to prove human-created coercion. Foundation and DSM-4 familiarity. Ronnie asks for foundation, seeking to establish Walla's expertise and authority. Question: Are you familiar with the DSM-4? Walla responds yes, likening her familiarity to knowing the Bible. IPAC versus IDOC lawsuit and SMI definition. Question: Are you familiar with the lawsuit between IPAC and the IDOC? Walla confirms and acknowledges the case settlement defined serious mental illness, which the DOC adopted. So the DOC is the one who, or not adopt, they took on the definition the that she just said. All right, so Walla's authority and experience, Ronnie argues that as lead psychologist, Walla has authority and experience to comment on treatment guidelines for Rick's patients, or for patients like Rick. 30-day policy and safekeeping status. Diener references the 30-day policy for SMI patients and notes that Rick experienced a brief psychotic disorder. Walla explains the existence of both the PPD, which is the persistent depressive disorder, and the SMI thresholds that influence treatment approaches, including the 30-day policy. She states this information regarding Rick would be considered new documentation. Walla clarifies that she can't comment on whether safekeeping status overruled the 30-day SMI policy during the court hearings. So SMI diagnosis and exception to privilege. Diener inquires how an SMI diagnosis changes exceptions to privilege concerning homicide cases. Ronnie's personal knowledge of SMI cases. A series of questions are posed to establish Ronnie's extensive personal knowledge of SMI cases. Is Ronnie a new person on the stand? No. We did Walla ever leave the stand? Who is Ronnie? Hmm. I'm confused. I feel like, yeah, Walla is still on the stand. I'm so confused. Okay. Who's this Ronnie person? We got past that. I don't feel right. All right, so SMI diagnosis and exceptions to privilege. Diner inquires how an SMI diagnosis changes the exceptions to privilege concerning homicide cases. Ronnie's personal knowledge of SMI cases. So a series of questions are posed to establish Ronnie's extensive personal knowledge of SMI cases. Drawn on personal knowledge of cases you followed regarding SMI. Answer: yes. Involved listening to podcasts? Yes. Followed on Facebook? Yes. Significant knowledge before Allen? Yes. Visited middle health building? Yes. Out of curiosity or intentional detour? Intentionally. Followed more closely after KK who is an unidentified individual. She said yes. Interested in KK's doctors? Yes. More closely after Allen? Yes. Intentional routine to listen podcasts on commute? Yes. Sought information on KK at work? Yes. Read insight inferring to software? Yes. So she took the initiative to do these things, to listen to these podcasts on her commute, or to follow closely Richard Allen or whatever. So, personal knowledge acquisition. Could Ronnie access private documents, personal history through software? Yes. Did this regarding KK? Answer: yes. Is this policy violation? Answer: yes. Side note, oh, the woman from Murder Sheet or whatever, yeah, whatever it's called. the ones who leaked or got the leak, I think they're working for the prosecution or getting leaks from the prosecution, but that's my opinion. The Murder Sheet podcast. That's one of the hosts of it. I can't say her name. I don't know how it's pronounced and I don't want to say it wrong, but she was chewing gum. All right, so Facebook comment and patient discussion. Did Ronnie post a picture comment post a Facebook comment after Rick's arrest considering he was her patient? Answer yes. In 2021 and commented on recommended podcasts. Follow-up question maybe question mark response inaudible. Question at any point did Ronnie talk to Rick about social media content? He has supporters. Answer yes. I told him because he thought everyone hated him. Is Ronnie who is Ronnie? I don't know. Is Ronnie Walla one and the same? APA ethical principles and potential violations. Ronnie hands Walla ethical considerations from the American Psychological Association, the APA. Principle V. Accept responsibilities and seek to resolve conflicts. Question. Could your Walla's social media activity be a violation? Answer. I don't disagree. So it could be. Principle E, so after they read the violation, the policy or whatever. Principle E, rights to dignity and privacy. It's noted that this is the gray area, unclear reference. All right. Conflicts of interest and objectivity. A question about a conflict of interest regarding Wallace intrusion. Confirmation that there is a conflict. Question, do you agree there is a conflict between being personally and legally involved? She says yes. Question, could your online activity interfere with your objectivity in treating him? She says no, not with what I need to hear or treat him. Question, what about following others on social media? She says no. I don't know. I don't think it's right that she's on these social media sites and talking about the case and learning about the case when she should be objective and be objectively evaluating him. Confidential information and note destruction. Did Walla obtain confidential information? Yes. Did she make notes? Yes. Were the notes destroyed? Yes. Question. Is the violation of Rule 4.0? Answer. Not sure. Everybody does it. What do I do with all that paper? She says. So as to is this a violation of the rule? She says, not sure. What do I do with all that paper? She wants to save it. Discussion about how Rule 4.0 necessitates a conversation about patient privacy, confidentiality, and exceptions with the patient. Follow up? Don't think so. Another doctor may have had this conversation with Rick, but Walla is unsure, so there was never any kind of follow up with him. Record keeping and APA guidelines, additional questions regarding record keeping standards, Walla's response in terms of testifying records, how we've always done it. Walla is shown APA guidelines. Impression is that Walla isn't familiar with them, not as much as I should be, she says. Litigation and record keeping liability, discussion of the rules regarding reviewing and preserving records in anticipation of potential litigation. Potential liability for the doctor if subpoenaed records have been destroyed. Diener's objection and relevance. Diener objects, stating that they appear to be discrediting Walla. Questions, they question the relevance to the claim that Rick's Miranda rights were violated through coercion. So the state doesn't think so. Rosie's arguments and Gull's ruling. Rosie argues the line of questioning is irrelevant, states that there is a violation of due process due to Rick's placement in DOC care despite his condition. And he highlights how DOC rules and procedures are crucial to the case. Judge Gull agrees with Rosie's assessment of relevance. Surprisingly, she agreed with the defense on something. Harshman guidelines and APA connection. Rosie provides Hashman, presumably an individual involved in this case, with APA guidelines. Question: do you agree your connection was improper? Answer: I do. Wouldn't do it in retrospect. The meaning of run at all is unclear. Where did she say run at all? I don't know. Remember, these are notes, so take it for what it is, what we've got, because Judge Gull won't allow cameras in the courtroom. DOC directive and RHU treatment. Rosie introduces a DOC directive from April 2022, Chapter 3.2, which addresses the individuals with intellectual and other developmental disabilities settlement regarding the treatment of prisoners in restricted housing units. He lists inappropriate facilities, notably Westville is not included. Walla agrees that she followed the 30-day policy only because of the safekeeping status imposed upon Rick. So she wouldn't have been following him she wouldn't have been checking in with him as much, I guess. Her statement is what I was told, not my call. Wish I could have, suggests frustration. So she's trying to shirk responsibility, say, I was just doing what I was told. It wasn't my call. I wish I could have done something else. But I'm innocent, Your Honor. Psychosis and confinement stressors. Psychosis induced by stressors pertaining to confinement was brought up by Walla. That'd be interesting. I'd like to know what they said there. Focus shift in, I think that's supposed to be Diener's questioning. Focus shifts. Rosie departs. So Rosie leaves approximately 2.5 hours later. Deanna begins questioning Walla. So there's another attorney questioning Walla now. I'm so confused who these people are. Asks if anything important from Walla's notes were excluded from her report. She says no. Deanna I want to say that that's Diener, but it's repeatedly Diana. I don't know. Okay, so where was I? Deanna presents intake paperwork, possibly from a different facility. Observations about Rick. Mentions of Rick taking care of himself within the confined cell space. Observations that Rick made the most of his environment and established order for himself. And there was confirmation that he maintained hygiene and ate regularly. Well, that's not what we just friggin' heard. That's a complete opposite of what Walla told us. 24/7 monitoring orders. Deanna asks if Walla ordered 24/7 monitoring. This must be another therapist. Walla clarifies it was for one day at the RDC due to Rick's high profile status. It is unclear who issued the 24/7 watch. That is interesting. Who ordered it? Why are you watching him? What are you watching him for? That's what I want to know. So guard engagement and statement solicitation. Question. When the guards took over, did they engage with Rick like companions? While answer, Walla nods but says, I can't watch them. I can't watch them. When the guards took over, did they engage like companions? She said, I can't watch them. Did you see them engage? No more than normal bringing food, etc. Did you even witness solicitation of statements? I didn't witness that. So she didn't see, or this person didn't see any kind of solicitation of statements or confessions, anything like that. Indiana State Prison ISP concerns. Question: did ISP want to talk to Alan through you? Answer: I think so about the list and Alan. I thought it was strange. Wallace says she talked to Rick and they decided against it. Rick's baseline and documentation. Confirmation that Rick's baseline is depression and anxiety. Reference to large volume of documents received in May 2013, unclear what documents. Acknowledgement that circumstances surrounding documentation changed on April 4th. Walla hadn't seen the documents. Changes in presentation and 24/7 watch. Notes presented indicated disagreements about Rick's speech processes. These notes considered recent only. Changes in Rick's presentation were noted, and a visit was deemed potentially bothersome at the time. On May 7th, a 24/7 watch was implemented, reasoning unclear. Why are you watching him 24/7 then? Companion statement sources clarification that previous quotes were from the companions. So certain things that were said from Rick, they were trying to identify if it was told to them from one of the prison companions. Rick's religion and crime connection. Question. Prior to April 4th, did he ever say he found God? Answer. Walla can't remember, but states that Rick was not religious at intake. On April 5th, the notes and reports mention a change in his status. Rick's statements and emotional effect. The discussion centers on Rick's statements about the facts and circumstances of his charges. So that's what he and Walla would talk about is uh, the circumstances around his charges. Notes describe the conversations as casual, checking in on how Rick was feeling, but not asking direct questions about changes. Question. Does he relate his newfound religion to the crime? Initially, Walla responds that she doesn't think so. After reviewing the last line, she changes her answer to say, quote, affect all over the place, smiling to crying. What? Assessment. Rick offered information without prompting. His reports about his feelings are questionable, aka not genuine. That's her assessment, that he's questionable and not genuine. Injection improvements and influence statements. It's noted that Rick's condition improved with the injections, these psychotic or antipsychotic meds that they're taking or giving him. It's unclear which injections are helping. So you're giving him, you're just dosing him up with a bunch of drugs. You don't know what you're giving him or what's helping him, but seems to be working fine. So let's just keep doing what we're doing. Walla reiterates that she presented the injection option to Rick, but it was not in his best interest to make statements given his legal situation, implying that his attorney would advise against it. Is he even of sound mind to make medical decisions for himself? If he's that out of it, he's catatonic at times, can he even decide whether he wants these injections or not? Could he decline getting the injections? Is that even a possibility? Does he even know that he's getting the injections? It's noted that Rick's condition improved with these injections. Walla reiterates she presented the injection option to Rick, but it was not in his best interest given the legal situation, implying that his attorney would advise against it. Walla notes that in her notes, it appears Alan is feigning memory lapses and confusion. So she thinks he's faking. He's faking memory lapses and confusion, according to Dr. Walla, Ms. Social media guru herself when it comes to the Delphi case. That's what she thinks. All right, so continuing on April 12th, 2023, there was a refusal of recreation and interview. Rick refuses to leave his recreation area for an interview. Deanna's confusion and psychosis assessment. Diener states losing memory, unsure what's being discussed. Walla notes that on one occasion she was asked to determine if Rick's behavior was due to psychosis or feigning illness. So which was it? Diener states losing memory. So he's losing portions of his memory and he doesn't know what's being talked about at the time. And he also has moments of feigning, where he's feigning illness, faking it. All right, video footage, Halidol, and over medication. There's a mention of video showing Rick being transported to receive an injection, which was his Halidol. Medication protocol injections are oral medications, weekly Halidol, nightly for sleep. Walla's assessment. Still, many days communication was impossible, so she wasn't able to talk to him. Concern about potential over medication. Well, you're in charge of his medication, bitch. Figure it out. Sorry, but if you're concerned about over medicating him, maybe don't over medicate him. Observed that he slept a lot following the injection. Rick claimed he was just laying there. Prozac and Dr. Martin's consultation. So he was like kind of catatonic. He's just chilling. I'm just laying here. I'm chilling. But it looked like he was sleeping because he wasn't moving. Prozac and Dr. Martin's consultation. I love his shoes, those Doc Martens. In addition to Halidol, Rick received Prozac, which he was on before his arrest. So, okay. In addition to Halidol, he's also getting Prozac. Both are, antidepressants. So, how do they interact together? Would be interesting to know. Dr. Martin visited once a week, consulted, he consulted about Rick's treatment, specifics not mentioned. Rick's condition improved and the Halidol was eventually discontinued. Okay, so I don't know, something improved within Rick, but it wasn't the Halidol that was doing it. All right, so weight fluctuations and control. Rick was obese upon intake, intentionally skipped meals in an attempt to regain some control and be healthier. Observation: lost weight, was healthy, then April 23rd, tanked, not healthy, eventually rebounded to a healthy weight. What does that mean? Tanked, not healthy, because he wasn't eating? Um, or what? He was eating his own feces and that was that? What, when did he become not healthy? She doesn't clarify. Conflicting statements and depression symptoms. Notes indicate that Rick could be highly talkative some days in April. Conflicting statements made that he wants to KILL his family and friends and myself. Materially, I don't want to lose my life. Too much of a coward, I don't. Sentence unfinished. Seizure of phone calls and tablet access. May 3rd, Rick experiences a seizure. He cries out for help and asks to call his wife, Kay. Kay does not answer the phone when Walla calls. Walla finds a cordless phone, locates the number, and assists Rick in dialing. Parenthesis, mention Rick whispering, what? Something. Mentioning Rick whispering to his attorney, possibly correcting something. Oh, like in parentheses, I guess. All right, so unclear. I forgot to put the parentheses. It's unclear how Rick was without his tablet. Possible topic of conversation. Rick attempts to call Kay. We're almost done here, guys. All right, so Rick's confession. I want to tell my wife what I've done. I want you to hear it. Rosie interrupts. Did he tell you what his wife said? Rick replied to Walla, she doesn't believe me. Yeah, so she doesn't believe Rick Allen said that he did it. That's kind of important. All right, so Dr. Diener's observation. Now, who's Diener? There's a Dr. Martin. Let's say that's Dr. Martin. Wants to address stressors, lack of consistent communication with the team. Rick sometimes felt that they didn't want to hear from them, especially during the period when he wanted to confess to many people. Yes, and whose confirmation is this? We'd like to know. So, lack of consistent communication with the team. Rick sometimes felt that he didn't want to hear from them, especially during the period when he wanted to confess. So Rick thought family members didn't want to hear from him when he was trying to confess, I guess. But where is that coming from? What source? Notes that finding God brought Rick comfort. Deanna claims that Rick said, "I'm gonna get right with God." Rosie Tawala asks if progress reports were noted, notes were destroyed. So if there were any progress reports, they've been destroyed, which is so dumb because you know that he's in prison. You know that anything that you write should be preserved. I'm sure you've been doing this long enough. Dr. Walla's observation. Dr. Walla has never seen Silence of the Lambs, question mark, red flag. Must have come up in testimony. June's condition, Halidol shots administered to June uh, despite her protests. June's condition. Runs from one side of the cell to the other, shaking, head injury, hand bruised. I have no idea who June is. Do you see these? No, I mean, they're so confusing. If you weren't there, you have no friggin' context behind it. So I'm sorry that these are all out of context, but we're right at the end here. Anyways, all right. So pay where are we? Tests discussion about feigning tests. Lori, just crayons and pencils, huh? And Walla, no, don't have them. They're not allowed crayons and pencils. Oh. Rick's psychological state. He lost 30 to 40 pounds in 2 months. Technically obese at intake, but not extremely unhealthy. Rick's desired transfer. He wanted to go to Transport State Hospital because he thought his family could see him there. So he wanted to go to wherever he could. So the hospital he wanted to go so that he could see his family, so that his family could come visit. Like that's how out of touch and out of reality he is, because he doesn't even know that they probably can't come and visit him if he's a prisoner. There'd be a guard like standing outside the room at all times too. All right, so ISP involvement. ISP name and initials unclear. Calls Hashman, also initials unclear, in his 40s, early 50s, detective for 17 years, assisted in homicides, involved in Delphi, early 2020s and or early 2020, Marshall's Regional Task Force. Once Allen was arrested, he was put in charge of monitoring communications. So that is all I've got for Dr. Walla today. Sorry, it kind of got confusing in some areas here, and there's a lot of people that are referenced that I don't know. Plus, there's probably a lot of typos on this too. But we got the main points. I think. I think we could understand what was going on regarding the some of the issues that Walla was talking about, and even just from like a brief, bullet point overview of what her testimony was, you could see that there's some inconsistencies and things that really are red flags. Not necessarily that hasn't seen Silence of the Lambs, but other things like when she didn't want or she didn't think that he was suffering any kind of psychosis, and yet she's got him on meds and doesn't know if they're working or not. But let's just keep on going. Things like that just make you go, hmm. What things about this case make you go, hmm? There's many. Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for being here. Take care, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.